What is it?
It's time to go back.
Welcome.
Well, hey there, welcome back to another episode of Generation S. It is a podcast about growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. I'm Dan Kemp, and I am joined today by our resident Mighty Morphin Power Rangers expert. He is the man who bleeds red, blue, black, white, green, yellow, and pink.
Green.
There it is. Lou Carnivale. Lou.
But now everybody can see that I have a face for radio.
Yes, this is for anyone who's been curious, because you've been all over our YouTube channel with a bunch of Power Ranger stuff, but it's all just been, voiceover. This is our first video podcast that we're doing together, and of course I know what you look like. I've known you for over 15 years, but now the world can see, so that's very exciting. And if you're listening to this,
radio.
Well, there it is. Yeah, face for radio, bro. Same here. We're good. But and if you're listening to this, sorry, you're not understanding any of this. But you can always check out the podcast on YouTube. It'll go up a few days after we put it out over the regular podcast platforms. So, Lou, we are here today in a two-part series. We just did a two-part series on Batman, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I figured let's do it again. We got a very special day coming up here in just a couple of weeks. That day being May the 4th. Also known as Star Wars Day. So, I mean, let's talk Star Wars and let's break it down. So we're going to do an episode today on the OG trilogy. We're talking the one that came out in the 70s and 80s. And then next week we're going to have a part 2 all about the prequel trilogy, because really those were the two sets of movies that kind of made up our childhood. The later movies that came out in the 2010s, that's past our childhood. We were well into adulthood at that point. So I figured it kind of made sense to just focus on those, I guess, 6 movies, for what we're going to be talking about. And, yeah, man, I mean, I'll say one thing about, if I were to sum you up in like a Venn diagram or like a word board, you know what a word board is? Where like you just see words that are thrown up there, like, and it makes up. Yeah. Like it's a corporate thing.
Oh God. Yeah.
Anyway, my point being, I can think of like 10 words that would go up that would be like that encompasses Lou Carnivale. And so Power Rangers,
half of them aren't probably appropriate.
Well, listen, half of them are not appropriate, but half of them are, and they include things like Power Rangers, wrestling, Ghostbusters, Ninja Turtles, and Star Wars would be one of the bigger ones up there because, and I've known this a long time, you are, a big Star Wars fan. You have been since you were a kid. I think we've touched on it previously in an episode. I can't remember which one it was, but I think because you've told me the story of how you got into Star Wars, but it was later in life. Like I didn't know when we were younger, like how you got into Star Wars until I finally was just like, how'd you get into Star Wars? I have no idea. And so you've told me the story. I can't remember if we talked about it on a previous episode, but today we're going to refresh everyone's memories in case we did already tell the story, because you are, I mean, in my opinion, one of the biggest Star Wars fans that I know, at least. I mean, where would you rank yourself in terms of like Star Wars fandom?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say maybe a 7.5.
Okay, so not even a 10. I would have put you at a 10. So
no,
you're saying
no. There's definitely people that know everything, read every. See, I didn't read a lot of the books. There are people that have read the books that are from like the Legends category that Disney has put out, the comic books, the TV shows, the medium of TV and movies. Yes, I'm very well into. Yeah, but I think that the next step with the books and the video games and all that good stuff that puts it into another level. So I would say I'm a 7.5.
Okay, all right. So still up there. I mean, if you're a 7.5, I'd say I'm probably somewhere between a 5.5 and a 6. Mm-hmm. Just because, again, I like the movies. I haven't kept up with them as much. I've definitely seen the original movies and the prequel trilogies, but I've never read a single Star Wars book. I've played very few of the video games. So, yeah, I'm a fan, but not a super fan, and apparently not an ultra fan, which is where we're putting the 9/10s in
people
this,
with tattoos.
People with Would you ever get a Star Wars tattoo?
No.
Well, you wouldn't get a tattoo anyway in general, right? You don't even want a tattoo.
Maybe. I'll tell you what, if the Jets win the Super Bowl, because we just got Aaron Rodgers today.
There it is.
That's why I have the hat on for folks that are not able to see. I have the stereotype of women have lots of shoes. Lou has lots of hats.
Yes, so you do have a lot of hats.
I do. So the Jets hat's on today because the Jets are relevant And it's not going to be a Jets complaint today. It's a happy day.
I mean, yeah. Listen, you can't always complain about the Jets. You have to give
I
some,
can.
No,
well,
you can, but what I'm saying is you shouldn't, though. You should have the days reserved for positive news if there is positive news, and just focus on it.
And today's one of those days.
Exactly. 1 out of 364. I mean, you're bound to get one eventually. So
yeah, right.
Oh man, good stuff. So okay, you would get a Jet. Anyway, my point being, you would get a Jets tattoo.
If the Jets win the Super Bowl, I would probably contemplate getting a Jets tattoo.
Right.
Small, somewhere.
Like a small one. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I would say don't go crazy. But you would never get a Star Wars tattoo.
No.
Really?
Nope.
Interesting. Okay.
I think I would get a sports tattoo 1,000 times quicker than I would get any pop culture tattoo.
Interesting.
Yes,
right,
even I would get a Yankee tattoo way before I get a Power Ranger tattoo.
Okay. Fair enough. Because I don't have any tattoos, but I've thought like my first tattoo is probably going to be Ninja Turtles if I get one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what I want. I don't know where I'd want it, so it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But if it did, it would probably be Ninja Turtles, and then
you should
go from
just
there.
do what Bam Bam Bigelow did in the WWF back in the day.
What,
for
my head?
For the folks that don't know, Bam Bam Bigelow was probably like a 400-pound wrestler, bald, and he had a head with just a giant flaming tattoo, just a giant flame.
Just get the flame with the widow's peak?
No, you should just get a giant turtle, like turtle shell.
A turtle shell on my head.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, listen, weirder things have happened, we'll say.
Yes, they have.
Who knows? All right, well, listen, let's get into it, man, because this is part one of a two-part journey through Star Wars in the 90s and early 2000s. And I mentioned it. Now, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you're probably not going to hear the intro because it's, if you're listening to the regular podcast, you'll have already heard Star Wars really wasn't that relevant during our childhood as far as kind of mainstream pop culture, right? I mean, you could almost call it a dry spell for Star Wars.
It certainly was. When I had my Nintendo and Super Nintendo, the Star Wars games that came out were on the original trilogy, but that was really it. It was dormant for what I remember my childhood of like the 90s to like the re-releases in 97, which we're going to go into, but it wasn't really front and center. I mean, it was such a fantastic trilogy of movies that the toys were kind of around, but it was nothing new. The video games were nothing new. It's not like they're making new stories in video games now. Jedi Outcast, Jedi Survivor, Battlefront, all these new Star Wars games are not even like. I mean, yes, they're based on the movies because it's the whole ball of wax.
They're based on the franchise. I mean,
but the games back in the day when we were kids was just here are those 3 movies and in video game form.
Well,
that was the most we got.
Basically, back then, it was the equivalent of like the Back to the Future trilogy, right? Where it was a great set of movies that people still loved and they were very popular, but that was basically it. They had the toys that were in the 70s and the 80s, and those were huge. I mean, we're talking like, and it was before our time, but like mega power selling of these, little Star Wars action figures from Kenner. But by the time we were kids, I mean, it had basically all but faded into obscurity until the re-release for the 20th anniversary. So I guess before we get into talking about that, because were you into Star Wars before the re-release, right? From your cousin?
A little bit. I think it was a mixture of my cousin, who's about 10 years older than me, being very big into Star Wars. Very, very big into Star Wars. Again, that next group of people that reading the books, he was one of those guys that knew about, Yoda used to fight. And I remember I had a little Yoda action figure, and I remember very vividly taking the lightsaber and it actually fit in Yoda's little claw hand. Like the figure was probably about like that big. There we go.
Yep.
And the lightsaber, it actually did fit in his hand. I go, oh my God, it fits in his hand. Yeah. That's so cool. And he's like, well, there's a battle in the books between Obi-Wan and Anakin basically Obi-Wan throws Anakin pretty much into like a volcano is how he described it at the time. And then, lo and behold, like, whoa, okay. So I got into it because of probably the toys being released for the re-release, 97-ish.
Yep.
And just having an older cousin that was into it also.
Okay. So really, but still kind of centered around like so is that when you like had you seen the movies when you were young? Like, because I'll tell you right now, the first time I actually saw the movies was after the re-release. I saw it on a very old format. I actually saw the original Star Wars movies on Betamax.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's just like I saw
Betamax.
Ghostbusters and all this. Yeah. So I saw it. I had a Betamax player, but it wasn't until I was like almost a teenager that I saw it for the first time. So it was probably like. I think I may have seen them before Episode 1 was released, so I guess late 90s, but I didn't see it in theaters. I hadn't, I'm pretty sure it was just my mom got it at a garage sale on Betamax, and that's how I watched it. But the point being was, I hadn't watched it like as a wee little one, right? I wasn't 5 when I first saw Star Wars. I was a little bit older, because again, it really wasn't in like mainstream pop culture until those re-releases.
I think I was into because, my cousin was older, so older cousin, therefore automatically, he's cooler, he can drive, he's got a job, he's got a girlfriend, and he likes Star Wars. Yeah. So I think I associated with, my cousin's older and blah, blah, blah. It's more adult if I watch Star Wars.
Right, exactly.
Over Power Rangers. That was probably the time frame where I was starting to get out of Power Rangers.
Yep.
Like, I got out of Turtles into Power Rangers, and then Power Rangers into Star Wars, because it was like the natural progression of things getting. I mean, Star Wars is nowhere near realistic, but it's not violent either, but more intense is the right word.
Well, it's more mature. There's some more mature themes, because they're movies too. It's not like a TV show for kids that are designed to sell toys. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they had merchandising in mind when they made the movies, but there was a lot of meat on those bones when it comes to story for Star Wars. It was pretty heavy stuff. So especially as a kid, it's like, wow, this is a lot to take in. And even back then when we saw them in the 90s, the special effects were pretty decent still. Like, there was some stuff that was obviously dated, but there was some pretty, like, to this day, I still feel like the lightsaber special effect that they used in the 80s is pretty impressive. I think it holds up pretty well, to the point where you can't really tell the difference between the lightsaber battle between, let's say, Luke and Darth Vader as you can between like Rey and, well, no, did Rey ever use her lightsaber? I don't know. Anyway, one of the ones from the latest trilogy.
But they're good movies.
Right, exactly.
We can't even remember anything about Rey. If you like that, this is for you, Dan, and for anybody that feels that way. After watching The Mandalorian, what popped up on my Disney Plus was, obviously other videos I may like. And there's a whole documentary, and it's very long. It's broken up into, like, I want to say 7 or 8 hour-long episodes.
Okay.
And it's with George Lucas, and it's him breaking down how they did these special effects back in the day. And I've watched the first 2 or 3, and I'm up to Empire Strikes Back, and they're showing how they did those special effects, and they pretty much like lied to the media about how they did it. Like, oh, Walter Cronkite's coming to do an interview with us. Like, yeah, just pretend you're doing stuff. Like, don't show everybody else our secrets.
Yeah.
Now everybody can do the same thing, but back then they actually had to.
They kind of pioneered all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, they created a studio that's still in Industrial Light and Magic, right? That was George Lucas's studio that is still around, I think, right?
So if you're into that, I highly suggest taking a look at that on Disney Plus. I can't remember the name of it, but if you go in the Star Wars section, you will easily find it. It's under the documentary section of it.
Because when those came out, again, and I'm talking the original releases in the late 70s and early 80s, like, there was nothing even close to it in terms of special effects. It was in a league of its own.
And the thing is, if you go back and listen to a lot of, like, Ewan McGregor, who played Obi-Wan in the prequels, has gone on record saying how he was blown away by the original Star Wars in the theater. There's been a lot of people, including my cousin, that said just that first scene in Episode 4, when the Star Destroyer is going overhead, and you could see the depth of it going over. Now it's nothing compared to what we could do with, technology.
Well, but it's like, 30 years later when the first Avatar movie came out, right? And, you say what you want about the story. There's nothing to write home there, but...
Last of the Mohicans?
I mean, yeah, or Dances with Wolves, whatever you want to call it, Pocahontas, who cares? But the point is, those special effects, they really weren't matched for how many years later. Now, of course, the CGI is up to snuff from other film studios.
Absolutely.
But it kind of set a standard that wasn't broken for one. I think Star Wars, the same thing to a degree. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. And that was one of the reasons why it was so big back in the day. Yeah. And that's why people were excited for these re-releases in the late 90s.
Yep, and so let's that's a perfect segue, Lou. I love that. You're just feeding it to me like that. That's good.
Put it on a tea for you. That's what I do.
So 1997, 20 years after the original release of the first Star Wars movie, Episode 4, New Hope, and they're
That's
all
Aaron
back out in
Rodgers.
theaters.
That's Aaron Rodgers, by the way, for the Jets. A New Hope.
Yeah.
It's all
New
coming
Hope.
together. Yeah,
there it
that's
is.
why
I love it.
Sorry.
So what they did was a monthly release. So they released Episode 4, I think, in January. They released Empire Strikes Back in February. Then they released Return of the Jedi in March of 1997, just to kind of spread things out. Apparently, they were so successful that they had to keep. I forget which one in theaters longer and delay the release of the next one because it was making too much money, which is crazy when you think about it. Now, I didn't see them in theaters, and I didn't see because they re-released them on VHS as well. I remember the box art. It was it was a 3-pack, right? You bought them, or no? Could you buy them individually? And they had but I remember the artwork was it lined up when you put them next to each other.
Was it the faces? Like one was Vader, one was Yoda, one was the Stormtrooper?
Yes, that's
yes.
That's the ones I'm thinking of.
Yes, that was for our era.
Okay,
that was the original version's VHS because I had A New Hope. I believe Vader was on it.
Okay,
and I think Vader was on A New Hope. I think the Stormtrooper was Empire, and I think Yoda was Return of the Jedi.
Okay,
and then when the re-releases came out and eventually came onto VHS, it was more of like a gold box.
That I remember that
art.
Too. Yes,
so I had Return of the Jedi in that. So I think I had the first two in the original, or I don't say original, the '90s version VHS. I had the A New Hope and Empire, and then
so those VHS tapes that I'm thinking of, those came out before the re-release then, or no? Did they come out in? Okay,
I believe those were just like VHS releases.
Okay.
Of the original version, then the special releases came out in theaters, and then those special editions came out on VHS.
And those special editions, if I recall, and maybe I'm wrong on this, those are the ones that George Lucas went back in and added additional scenes and special effects in the CGI?
Correct, and Han didn't shoot first.
They made it so Han didn't shoot first, and they made Jabba look like Jabba, and he shows up in A New Hope.
Yeah, he calls him a wonderful human, and he's a giant slug.
Yes. So he definitely he went back and he tinkered, and I think at the time some of it looked pretty cool because the CGI for the time was nice. But if you look back on some of that stuff now, it has not. And that's the thing with CGI in general; it does not age nearly as well as practical effects.
It does. It does not. Excuse me. I'm agreeing with you there. It does not look as good. Like the chicken walkers that they put in Empire in the background. It's just like okay, it looks kind of meh.
Yeah.
It was
but I mean, for the time, it's kind of cool because it's. But I feel like at the same time, if you were a big fan of the original and he's throwing this stuff in these new ones, that might piss you off. I don't know. And again, I don't have a dog in that fight. But I mean, what were your thoughts? What were you at the time when you saw them?
Well, at the time, I was so new into it, I didn't grasp what was. It was just new stuff. Looking at it now. The extra little the things that the sand troopers they look like elephants or they're bantas. That's what they're called.
Yeah.
There's extra little things of those. Okay, it gives you a view that the Empire is bigger. Or Han's on the Death Star and he goes into that corner and the door opens up and there's more stormtroopers. It's 50 instead of a dozen or so. That's okay. It doesn't make or break it. The thing with Jabba's funny. I actually do like that. Knowing where it goes is cool. But for the most part, I think it was just a cash grab. For obvious reasons, yes, they're in the business to make money. But I think they put maybe, a small amount of money into re-releasing these. Yeah. And then that pretty much funded Episode 1, in my opinion.
To be honest with you, I think it kicked off and reinvigorated the franchise in general. I think the momentum train, as I say in the intro, started with the re-release of the original movies, and it hadn't stopped since. That was we're talking 25 years ago, over 25 years ago, and it didn't really stop after that.
There was a time after it, after the prequels. There was a time after the prequels that stopped for a while, but we could touch on that
Well, we'll talk about that in the prequel episode because I don't know if I agree with that, and but I have reasons, and we'll talk about that in the next episode because I thought of that very specifically of the Momentum Train. So, so with the re-release of the films, of course, you had the toys. Now, did you yourself own? Did you get the toys that came out with this?
I had the toys. It was, oh man, I don't know what the Power of the Force is. What I want to say the collection was.
Okay.
It was like the 3.5, 4 inch.
It was the Kenner figures with I remember it was like a black and green background, like cardboard, and it was like you had a picture of the guy in the movie. Now, what I thought was interesting because I actually, I had a couple. I had Luke, I had Vader, I had a few of them. I remember my grandparents when I went and visited them. They had all my uncle's old original Star Wars toys from the 70s. I kept them.
Oh boy,
they don't have any more, unfortunately. But I remember playing with them, and I remember like all the lightsabers like were just built into their arms almost.
Yep.
Where like you pushed them out. And I'm like, this is weird because the ones that we got were actual separate little accessories. They looked pretty cool, but it was
they held them straight up like this.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus like out like this where you could, I'm holding it up to the camera where you can like sword fight with them or whatever.
Yeah. They gradually got better.
No, they definitely did. And so, but no, I'm trying to think. Like, I think I had Empire Strikes Back Luke. I had Vader. Just whatever. It's Darth Vader. He didn't really change. I had a probe droid from Empire Strikes Back. And then I'm trying to think who else I had. I think those are the... And then I had another droid, I think from a scene in Return of the Jedi at Jabba's palace.
Did you have any ships?
I did not. Yeah, I did, because I didn't really get into it that much. I really wasn't a huge fan. So, like, I didn't, like, invest in the vehicles and all that stuff. What about you?
I had an X-Wing. I had a TIE Fighter, regular TIE Fighter. And I had Slave One. Yes, I called it Slave One. Deal with it.
Is that Boba Fett's ship?
Yes, that is Boba Fett's ship. And did I have one more? I think I had an A-Wing.
An A-Wing?
Pretty sure I had
now that you mention it, I remember I did have an X-Wing fighter with a little tiny pilot, Luke Skywalker and R2-D2 that went in it.
Yeah.
But it broke very
R2
easily.
was built into it, and when you pressed R2, the wings would fly out.
I think so. Well, no, I remember I had to do the wings... I had to do them manually. Like, I would have to grip the back exhaust whatever's and, like pinch them to, like, get the wings up.
Oh.
So, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they came out with a ton of them. So, know
sure
what I mean.
Did.
But, so, okay, we're talking about toys. Let's talk Lego for a second, because you're not a big Lego guy. I know this about you. Did you ever have an interest in, like, Lego Star Wars?
Like
not the games, just, no, the toy. Like, the original late 90s toys. Okay.
Nope. Did not have any interest in Lego whatsoever.
Okay, because I remember I didn't get into Lego Star Wars, the toys, until like Episode 1 came out, and just because I was a little bit older. But I remember it being a big deal because it was like their first licensed like property that they made into Lego form. Now it's everything; you can get everything in Lego form. But back then, Lego Star Wars, that was a big deal because like you had this franchise that was like giving their likeness to Lego, and you look at earlier builds that they came out with, and they were pretty primitive compared to some of the stuff you can get now. But back then, man, I mean, it was pretty cool. And I'm saying all this to say that I had a Lego X-Wing fighter that was just pretty dope. So I remember liking that more than my other actual plastic, like regular toy X-Wing fighter because it just looked cooler. And I built it myself, so it was more fun.
Yeah, I did have some ships, did have some action figures. I had a toy lightsaber, which by today's standard is nothing compared to the Force FX and Black Series and all this crazy stuff they have.
But was
now.
it one of the ones that made noise with the clear, like it extended but not all the way?
Yeah.
So like,
yes.
Yes.
Luke's
so jealous
lightsaber.
of kids that had those. Yes. Oh my God. And it was cool, man. It looked pretty cool.
It did.
I think the only thing I didn't like about it was the fact that the green part for Luke's in this case wouldn't go all the way into the handle. So like you'd have like the bottom half, but it made sounds when you would hit stuff on it, and
yes,
it looked cool. I do.
And if we're talking about the newer ones, not the ones that are out now, they came out with like the first versions of like the higher quality lightsabers, the Force FX ones. You've seen them at my place.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I have Luke's green. I have Vader, actual Darth Vader, not like Anakin Vader.
Right.
Darth Vader, and that's it from the original. The other ones are from the prequels, which I'll mention on
which
the
we'll
next
talk
episode.
about, yeah.
Yep.
I remember those very well because in college we used them for a film project.
Oh boy, haven't thought about that in forever.
Well, I just had a thought. I mean, it's sitting on one of my hard drives. Maybe I'll put that up on the YouTube channel too.
Oh
so you can check
God,
it out.
no.
It's great, man. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
Shot in
well, I
a
was in
lovely
college, I made
480p.
this really bad movie. No, it's not what you think it is. It's even worse.
No, it's graded. I got an A on it. So anyway,
That's good.
But the lightsabers played a part in that film.
Yes, they
so
did.
I had fond memories of your Force FX lightsabers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any more? Like, have you got any newer ones or no?
No, they're way too expensive.
Yeah, they're pretty pricey these days.
Way too expensive. The only character I want, I'll mention it on the prequel show.
Okay, fair enough. So let's talk video games then, because they're again, but especially before the re-releases, they're really even after the re-releases, before the prequels, there wasn't any new video games other than you had the original Star Wars on Nintendo, which I never played, and then you had the one that is way more well known. I still haven't played it, but I've seen my friends play it. Is the Super Star Wars series on Super Nintendo?
Hair on your chest.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. So did you play the one on Nintendo? Is there much to say there?
No, I didn't. The first one I remember playing, like legitimately playing, not emulator playing, was Super Star Wars on Super Nintendo, and it was one of those games. If you weren't a teenager at the time, you probably put it in, thought you were going to jump on things and you were going to be done with it. It was hard. It was too hard.
Now, was it 3 separate games or was it the trilogy in one game?
I think it was 3 separate games.
It was. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think you're right.
Were different back then.
Because I didn't play them. I didn't own them. So yeah, that's so you can't recommend them then. You don't like them. Like, would you go back and enjoy them at this point?
I mean, now as an adult, it'd probably be a little bit easier, and emulation would make it easier also. So it's a different ball of wax right now. To me, the biggest Star Wars game of the prequel era that came out, not of the prequel era, is Shadows of the Empire on N64.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Shadows of the Empire was the first. To me, was the first big book in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And they had the book. They made action figures of it. So you had, I remember, there was like, it wasn't a clone trooper, but it looked like it was Luke in like some red armor, and he had a helmet come off like he was a stormtrooper in disguise. There was like Chewie like dressed as a bounty hunter. There was Prince, I think his name is Sizor. He's made it into some animated shows now. So it was a different toy line of Shadows of the Empire from the book, and then came out the video game, and that was like the first 3D Star Wars game. So it was like it was a lot to unpack, because first 3D Star Wars game on N64, or of that era, other than that terrible fighting game that came out on PS1. Ooh,
I love that game.
Masters of Terra Kasai.
Can I just shout that out for a second? Because I thought that game. It's such a fun game. It's terrible. I'm not going to say it's not terrible, but I remember my sister's boyfriend had it and on PS1, and I played it. I'm like, what is this? This is amazing. And I would always use Luke Skywalker because you got to swing around the lightsaber. Did. Yeah, of course. There were some characters that I didn't recognize, but there were some that I did, and I had no idea that the Sand People actually had a name, which was Tusken Raider. Yep. I just thought they were the Sand People.
The Gamorrean guard they called Hor.
They did.
That was his name in the game. They called him Hor.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying the game aged well, Lou. Okay, I'm just point is, it was a subpar 3D 2D fighting game for the PlayStation, and I feel like it's kind of a forgotten, maybe for good reason, according to you.
I was going to say for good reason.
I guess you can't. I can't call it a hidden gem either, because I feel like that's probably not fair. But it's a forgotten little. Right. It's a little piece of history when it comes to Star Wars. Now, it's funny, you mentioned the Shadows of the Empire. There was another game that I remember being even more popular, but I guess it came out afterwards. Wasn't it like Rogue Squadron on N64? Or there was one where you would pilot the A-Wings, and you had there was a whole scene on Hoth. What game was that?
Well, Shadows of the Empire, you did play on Hoth.
Okay.
But there was Rogue Squadron on N64, and there was Rogue Squadron on GameCube, but
yeah,
I feel like Shadows of the Empire was like the first real big Star Wars
I think that's the one that I saw. Yeah, because in that one, are you piloting an A-Wing and wrapping up the AT-ATs and knocking them down?
You're tying it up, and you're playing as Desh Rendar, which was, again, it was like the first new character for Star Wars. So
I remember. Okay,
Shadows
that's the one I remember.
Was a big deal.
I saw that in commercials. I saw it in magazines, and I thought that looks really good because I'm trying to think. I mean, I know like the prequel trilogy had games on the N64 and on the GameCube and stuff, but as far as the original series, what else was there then? Because there was arcade games. I remember there was an arcade game that I never played, but I saw it at a Kmart one time. And because they had arcade games back in Kmart's back in the day. And it was one where I think it was partially like a flying simulator one, but it was also, there was a scene where like you're actually fighting Darth Vader from a first person perspective with a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. Does that ring any bells to you?
Sounds like a game that would be on a VR headset right now.
I mean, it would. And in fact, I will highly recommend Star Wars Vader Immortal if you have an Oculus headset because it's pretty dope.
I have played that, and that is intense.
It's great, right? Have you played all three parts?
Can't say I have. I just remember playing it and going for my favorite character's lightsaber and using hers and taking it from there.
It's amazing.
Notice I said
so
her.
Good. I did notice that. Yes.
I'm winking to the camera because they can see me now.
That's right. Yeah, and you look great.
Her lightsaber.
So, yeah, I guess I can't think of any other video games. I mean, there's only one more. And I think it technically came out with the prequel stuff as well, but Star Wars Battlefront, the original one on the Xbox.
Yeah, that's prequel era. We got to put a pin in that.
But they have like modes where it's just the original trilogy, though.
They do. I mean, if you want to go into that, I'll certainly go into it because that's one of my top 10 games of all time.
Well, let's just talk about it for a second because it is. I think it's, in my opinion, one of my favorite Star Wars games ever.
Yeah.
The original.
To me, it is my favorite Star Wars game in general.
Yeah.
It is one of my top 10 games of all time. And I'm just saying Battlefront as a whole because there's 4 of them now.
Yeah.
But the original
there's 1 and 2 and then 1 and 2. Yeah.
But both number 2s are the best.
Yes, always.
I still play the newer number 2 on a semi-regular basis. I'm still playing
And that one I think even shows a lot more love to the original trilogy than the original ones did on Xbox. I feel like they
do.
You know,
the new trilogy gets no love, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
let the hate mail come in. Sorry.
No, the new I can say that the new Star Wars movies are very underwhelming. I'll say that. I don't want to say that they're terrible because I don't think they're bad, but I don't think they're amazing. Like I don't have the desire to rewatch any of them that I've seen.
I only have a desire to watch one scene, and it's the first 5 minutes of the last one when you see Palpatine somehow return.
Oh, see, and it's funny. I actually haven't seen that one yet. So
wow, you haven't?
Yeah. I wasn't even. I'm like, I'll see it eventually. I don't really care. Like I wasn't excited to see it. That's how much I don't care about the new ones. You know what I mean? But
the more I watch of other things, other Star Wars mediums, Mandalorian, Andor. Just makes me dislike those movies even more.
Yeah, because they're putting out good Star Wars stuff these days. It's just not what you're seeing in movie theaters.
Correct.
So, I'm trying. I mean, this is not that long of an episode. I'm just looking at the timestamp here, and it's going to be as long as it.
I could.
Well,
keep going if you wanted
well,
me
listen.
to.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, as far as the original trilogy, then, what are some areas that you feel we haven't covered that we should be discussing right now?
Well, like you said, the re-release certainly jump-started almost everything. It got everybody excited. I don't know off my top of my head, and I should, shame on me, did they announce the prequels that they were coming and then did the re-release? Or did they do the re-release and then announce the prequels were coming out?
Yeah,
because either way, even though we're talking about the original movies, it certainly created the buzz. Was back in the late 90s, heading into the prequels. I think once you got out of 4, 5, and 6 being in the movies again, everybody was very excited, and that fever pitch for you're going to get the next trilogy of movies made.
Yeah,
everybody excited, absolutely everybody. And you asking about that ranking before? Where do I put myself on a scale of 1 to 10, once they found out that they were making the prequels, I think anybody that even had a 0.5 on the rating scale of Star Wars fans was super excited to have these movies coming out.
Well,
and
I think
pumped out everything.
Well, and I was just going to say, I think the closest you could compare to in modern times is, for some people, is when they announced the new Jurassic Park trilogy, right? Now, I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's my favorite book. But as far as, like, you have these movies that ended, in the early 2000s, and then all of a sudden, 10-plus years later, all of a sudden, you're like, hey, wait a second, we're making 3 new movies. And you're like, what? And so I was pumped to see the first Jurassic World movie in theaters because I loved the original 3 movies so much. That's probably the closest it would be. I'm trying to think of anything else that's done the same thing. That's probably the closest. But as far as going back to the Future movies,
yep,
I don't think they should make more Back to the Future movies at all. But if they did announce a new Back to the Future trilogy, I don't care. I'm going to go see them in movie theaters, and I'm going to be excited to see them in the movie theaters.
And that's what everybody did with Star Wars. And
exactly.
Then the curtain came up.
Whatever.
Episode 1.
I like Episode 1, but we'll talk about that.
I liked Episode 1, but 4, 5, and 6 came out for another group of eyes. It was another generation. Yes. And the weird thing is, I was very surprised they didn't do that with the sequel trilogy. They didn't release formally. Now, during COVID, up by me, where I live in the Northeast, we still have drive-ins. We have a few here and there. During COVID, they would just take random movies. Pretty much, they would just play them off DVD. But you were getting out. This is at the height of COVID in this summer of 20. You were just happy to get in your car with your, somebody you trusted, and go to the movies. And one of the movies I was so excited to go see. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care. It's the second movie. I want to watch Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yeah.
In a drive-in movie.
On the big screen.
It was freaking great. I loved it. But in that moment, I go, why didn't they do not that I'm like, here, take more of my money.
Right.
But I'm surprised they didn't do something. Like they did it with Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters had a limited release before Afterlife came out of the original movie.
But not the sequel.
But not the sequel. And not the reboot either. God, no.
Right. Yeah, no.
But I'm surprised they didn't do it. I mean, how much money would it have cost them to do a limited release, even if he just did the original?
But haven't they re-released the original trilogy after 97? I feel like I've seen them showing in theaters.
Maybe.
Maybe not.
Maybe
I don't know.
I don't know. I remember when they came out on Blu-ray. That was a big deal because I got to upgrade my DVDs into Blu-ray. Now it's all digital, but I'm a fan of physical media because who knows?
Yeah.
What people are going to get offended by and cancel Star Wars? Who knows? I like having a physical copy of my own. Yeah.
Now, if you're going to go watch, so I'll ask you this: how long has it been since you've watched any of the original trilogy? Not, I guess, other than the drive-in experience, like at home.
Like actually, saying, "Boy, I feel like watching this," and just putting it on, or
do you watch them every year? Or
I'm weird. I still have cable. I know.
Yeah.
Just flipping through the channels and it's on. I'm like, oh, I'll watch it for a little bit. Does that count? Or I just feel like watching it.
And I'm talking. You mentioned you have the physical media. You're going to take the disc out, pop it into your player, and sit down and watch it, start to finish.
I don't think I even have it in my DVD rack anymore, so to speak, because I know I have it on Disney Plus.
Right. So
I still own it, but it's for saving space for right now.
It's in storage or whatever. Yeah.
It's in a box somewhere. It's along with all the Marvel movies because I just need to make space for other classics like Batman the Animated Series, which is the box sets, like that thick still.
Yeah.
Just put it in one DVD case and just have multiple layers.
Well, then we'll say that. Let's not even count physical media, but you actually booted up and intentionally watched it from start to finish on Disney Plus. Then when was the last time you did that for any of the original trilogy?
Any of the original? I'm probably gonna say in the wintertime. If I had a really bad snowstorm, I'll put it Empire Strikes Back because I don't know. It's funny when you're getting a foot of snow and it's like, oh, it looks like hot outside. Well, I'm
Let's
working
watch
from
Star
home.
Wars.
I'll put it on in the background while I'm working. Hope nobody from work is watching this.
Listen, I know you work very hard, and I know you work very hard too. As far as, because I want you to rank the original trilogy from your favorite to least favorite, but I feel like there's more to cover here. I don't know. I'm curious. I'm going to ask you. So
okay, you want me to do that? If I could rank them?
Or do you want to maybe not against each other? Let's grade them on their own merit. How about that?
Okay.
You want to do that? So like, let's
scale
use
of
the
1 to 10?
classics. I was even going to say let's do like the school grade scale: A minus, B plus, C minus, whatever.
Okay, so am I doing it from like a storyline perspective or just like overall enjoyment? Because there's a
let's do overall enjoyment, because I feel like
Okay.
storyline. I mean, then we'd be getting into the nitty gritty of story structure, and this is not the episode for that. We may do that in the future
Sure.
on YouTube.
So I would give the original one, taking away the pizzazz of it being in the 70s.
Yeah.
And oh my God, so somebody in the 70s is going to give it like it was absolutely amazing because it was at the time.
Yeah.
It's still a fantastic movie, but for me it's a B.
Okay.
Having watched what comes after it, which is really before it, it's a B.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Now, are you also taking into consideration the other two movies in the trilogy in terms of like knowing what's going to happen next? Does that change your overall perception of the movie?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's a victory. They won the day, but they didn't win the war. So it's like, okay, you won today. Like the Jets. You had one good day out of 365. You won the day.
Yeah.
Okay, the rebellion won the day. But okay, I'm going to go on a soapbox for a second. Okay, well, the reason I'm giving it a B is as a Star Wars fan at a 7.5, watching the Clone Wars and Rebels and the Bad Batch, and Star Wars fans are going to know what I'm talking about. All these animated shows or books or comics that have taken place between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
To just skip all that and go, Luke Skywalker got found on a desert planet, hopped in an X-Wing and blew it up. It's like, no, there's so much more.
Yeah.
There's so much more. And it's not, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a bad movie because of it, but there's just such a larger scope of a story that happens in the Star Wars universe that is now canon.
Yeah.
That this movie is like, okay, it's a good movie. How could you not like that movie? It's just not. I don't think anybody. I've met people that like, oh, I don't really like Star Wars that much. I've never really met anybody that goes, I hate it.
Right.
I think the worst to say is I don't like it, but I know why people do. Like I do with Harry Potter.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good example because you're not a huge fan.
No, I'm playing the new game because it's a good game, and I'm talking about the Harry Potter game. Hogwarts.
Hogwarts.
If you don't know
Legacy
anything, if you don't know anything about Harry Potter, it's still a good game.
Yeah.
I know why people like I know why people are obsessed with Harry Potter, but I've watched them. They're cool. Not for me though.
Right.
And there's people I feel like there's a lot of people like that with Star Wars, so that's why I would give A New Hope a B from the standpoint of, man, I know there's so much more of a story before this, but it's still a very good movie.
Yeah. Now, and let me ask you, when you just called it A New Hope, in general, when you're referring to the original, do you call it Episode 4? Do you call it
Yes.
A New Hope? Okay.
Yeah. I call it either or.
Okay. You don't just say Star Wars, the first one.
Nope. That could be confusing, especially to younger folks. Wow, I sound old. Younger folks.
Because back then it was just called Star Wars. Like on the box art, it was just Star Wars.
It was.
And then you had Star Wars: A New Hope, Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. But those were like subset titles underneath it versus Star Wars. But technically, it's Star Wars: A New Hope when you look at the entire pantheon.
Yes, and Empire, I would probably give it a 10 out of 10. A+.
So A+. I mean, is it a perfect Star Wars movie in your opinion?
It is. I think it's still the best Star Wars movie. I think it's. I mean, now in the grand scheme of things, I guess it's still a sequel, but at the time, it was a straight up sequel. And I say it's the best sequel of all time because.
Yeah.
It was a different. Like the bad guys won. Like
they got their asses kicked.
Won. Luke
there was
his hand chopped off. Han's in carbonite. You don't know if you could trust Lando. The Empire is pretty much starting to take over again. Like, it's a dark movie. Like,
they win nothing.
Win.
There's not even a small battle they win in that movie at all.
Huff,
I feel like
they don't win it; they escape it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They don't win. They don't win a single battle. Like there's nothing. It's all they're constantly on the run, and it's things are going terrible. So yeah, I would agree. I think it's the perfect Star Wars sequel. I don't think it's not my favorite sequel to a film of all time, though. I will say that. That would be The Dark Knight with the second in the Christian Bale trilogy.
Okay.
That
I can see
that is the best sequel to a first movie of all time, in my opinion.
Okay, but here's the thing.
But Empire's up there.
But Batman was an already established character, and so was the Joker.
That's fair. Whereas this was all brand new, so that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. It is it is a sequel, but it's a different kind of sequel.
Yes. No, absolutely.
Yes.
I would 100% agree.
From a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view. So, a side note, by the way, when you saw Empire, did you already know that that Darth Vader was Luke's father?
Oh, you spoiled it for people. They may not have known for 40 years.
Yeah.
Did I know? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I knew.
I knew.
I think everybody knows.
Well, now they do. Knows. But did they know back in the 90s? I guess they probably did. They had to.
I think I knew. I think everybody knows that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Yeah.
And it has the Mandela effect. Luke, I am your father. It does. No, it's not what he says.
No, he does not say that. Who says that?
I am your father.
Exactly. Yeah, where'd they get the Luke, I am your father from? Who knows?
You know where I think it came from? Because I worked at Hollywood Video back in the day.
Yeah.
And they would have like famous movie quotes on the walls. So if they had Luke, I am your father, to give it context of who's saying it.
Because if it's just saying I'm your father, then what is that from?
It could be from a naughty movie.
Exactly.
But that's true. I think that's where it came from was, like T-shirts and posters and quotes. No, I am your father, or I am your father. Well, what is it? No, Luke, I am your father.
Right.
It's probably more of a marketing strategy where people think that's actually what Vader says, which is what he does not say. So,
yeah. So, but I mean, it's close enough. All right. So that brings us to the third. And actually, funnily enough, I saw Return of the Jedi before I saw Empire Strikes Back. Do you know why?
Why?
I thought it was the second movie in the trilogy because it had the word return in it, just like Batman Returns was the second Batman movie. So I assumed Return of the Jedi was the second Star Wars movie. Didn't know how to read Roman numerals, so that intro didn't do shit for me. So I'm like, I am so confused. Why the hell is Han Solo a statue? And what's up with Luke's new lightsaber? And why is he wearing a glove? And what's going on? So I was so confused.
One of the... Without going in a really big tangent, one of the biggest issues I have with Star Wars, if I could say I really want that in a movie, there's a deleted scene, very famous deleted scene of Episode 6, and it's gotten more and more popular after the prequels came out. They show Luke constructing the green lightsaber, like days, hours before he actually goes to visit Jabba. And it's supposed to look like Obi-Wan's lightsaber because that's where he got, like, the blueprints.
Right.
Fast forward to the prequels. Well, after, spoiler, Qui-Gon dies and Obi-Wan takes his lightsaber. The storyline is Luke uses the blueprints of Obi-Wan's lightsaber to create his, and he uses Qui-Gon's crystal. In Return of the Jedi, you see Luke constructing his lightsaber, and he turns it on, and it's just a cool moment of like, oh man, that'd be so cool if they made a super duper extra edition, and they put that back in of like, and dub over Mark Hamill or somebody sounding like him, like, oh, Master Qui-Gon, thank you so much. I don't know why Luke Skywalker sounds like a munchkin in my head right now, but he does. But that would be a cool moment if they redid that.
Yeah.
But I digress. Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks, the little furry guys that the Empire should just kick. I get it. It's showing that technology is not everything, and good triumphs over evil, and never tell me the odds. It was okay. I think the fight between Luke and Vader was great. That music was fantastic.
Yeah.
The Emperor just showing how powerful he is. Like, he doesn't need a lightsaber, which you see down the road, or which is technically a flashback, I guess. It established that both of them were afraid of Palpatine, or just the Emperor back then. He didn't have a name.
Yeah. Well, because it was the movie
were
that
afraid of
showed that, like, you'd heard about the Empire, but up until that point, Darth Vader was like he was the final boss, right? He was the epitome. All of a sudden, he's playing second fiddle to this other guy that shows up, and you're like, whoa, wait a second. Okay, Darth Vader is pretty scary,
and he's
but this
kneeling
guy.
to him. He's kneeling.
Exactly.
Darth Vader is kneeling to somebody.
Yep.
So when you see that in Empire, it's intense.
Yeah. So you're like, wait a second. So it's funny with Return of the Jedi, and I'll ask you for the grade in a second, but I want to say this. I remember loving it as a kid. Anytime I've seen it since then, I have liked it less and less. It is not like, I don't know what it is. I think it's because I like Empire more and more. So, like, for example, you mentioned that the Vader Luke lightsaber battle. I actually don't like it as much as I like the one they had in Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, so I agree with you. The fight itself is better. The emotion that you see Luke snap.
That's fair,
All, indications is being a nerd, that's 7.5.
Yeah.
He, for all intents and purposes, is in the dark side in that moment. He snaps and he just goes for the kill, which you're not supposed to do. So that's why, as a Star Wars fan, for me at least, like, that's a better emotional fight, because Luke's like, screw it. I'm going in. I know what's going on. My dad doesn't care. I got to protect my sister, my friends, my this, my that. My dad had his opportunity more than once, and I'm going to end this.
Yeah.
Sounds just like his father, actually.
I guess if you were to put it in, like, wrestling terms, this is how I've kind of justified it.
Okay.
Empire Strikes Back battle was Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, WrestleMania 3.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say Luke and Vader Part 2 in return, or, Round 2 in Return of the Jedi was the equivalent of Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. Terrible wrestling match, but my God, was the crowd really into it. It had the emotional story behind it.
It certainly did. And then you have the Emperor after it, and the special effects. You're talking about the special effects. Well, the ships and everything. What about the special effects when he's roasting Luke and you see like
the skeleton,
the electricity, and the electricity going in his teeth.
Yeah,
and I don't know if this is just from the special edition. It probably is. Did you ever know that when Vader picks up the Emperor to throw him down the shaft, where he kind of dies.
Right.
Somehow he returns. He has a muffled voice of Anakin Skywalker. Did you ever know Vader says that?
I don't know.
You will call me Master. Palpatine says something to the effect of, "You will die, or you will call me Master," like your father.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. Vader picks up Palpatine and says, again, something to the effect of, not Anakin Skywalker. Like, you're not the master of Anakin Skywalker. You're the master of Darth Vader.
So I'll say this. I saw it first on Betamax, and that line is not in there. So I'm guessing it's probably a special edition re-release.
It's probably special edition, because when Vader comes back as a Force ghost, it's Anakin from the prequels.
Yes.
Which a lot of people don't like.
No, because you had the original guy who was just a portly old gentleman who was, he just looked like everyone's dad.
That was supposed to be Vader turning back to the light side, which
yes.
I agree with you. There was no need to change it. So why didn't they redo Obi-Wan? Because Obi-Wan died. He appears as he died in Episode 4 as an older man. He was on the light side. So if Vader in death returned to the light side as Anakin Skywalker, that means when he's being dragged to the shuttle, that's Anakin Skywalker on the light side. That's who dies. He dies as Anakin in Episode 3 right before he makes some very grave mistakes, shall we say.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, don't give them any ideas, because I could see them totally reshooting those scenes with Obi-Wan now talking to Luke. So, I mean...
Oh, Ewan McGregor doing it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I could totally see them doing that and calling it the Ultra Super Special Edition. So, don't give them ideas.
Well, you have that. Listening. I mean, I could touch on it for a second. We're talking about the original movies. We could just talk about it as the original storyline.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, they have all these shows. They made the Obi-Wan show. And a lot of people were upset. We're like, well, who's going to fight Vader? Because it's not going to be Obi-Wan. Holy crap, he does fight him. that was very decisive. So now that also ruins episode 4. So when Obi-Wan sees Vader for up until this past year, even with the prequels, even with all the books, the comics, and this and that, you watch episode 4, you see, Obi-Wan as the old man, Ben Kenobi, he stops and he goes, holy crap, like, that's Anakin now. Because he's seeing Vader for the first time. Now he sees in the Kenobi show, it's a good fight, it's fantastic, but that feeling of watching episode 4 of like...
It takes away from it, yeah.
Yeah, like, oh my God, that's him. It's Anakin. It's gone now. Now you see it as Ewan McGregor's portrayal of Obi-Wan, which I think is fantastic.
Yes.
But all these movies, TV shows that are in between 3 and 4, to me, have expanded the enjoyment and also hurt the enjoyment of the original trilogy, if that makes sense.
Well, because it takes away the opportunity to kind of come to your own conclusions. And I think there's value in that with any story of like, okay, you don't know what happens next, so you kind of have to put those pieces together yourself, and it's whatever story you want it to be until you're told exactly what you want it to, and then you're told what the story is, and if it doesn't align with what you thought it was going to be, that could hurt your enjoyment. If it's exactly what you thought it would be, I mean, you're like, yes, I called it, but that's not usually the case.
Are you talking about my Power Ranger videos when I'd have to do fan theories because everything's like jumping to conclusions and filling in the gaps yourself? That's what Star Wars used to be, but now it's being all spelled out.
All the map is uncovered, yeah.
When did we go from clones to stormtroopers? That's going to be in a TV show probably next year.
Yeah.
Does it hurt the aura? To some, it might. To some, it might go, give me the answers I've been wanting. I want to know. Why did they change? When did they change? When did they get the new suits and all this other jazz?
Well, I think ultimately that's the thing. It's ultimately, if you don't want to know, you don't have to watch it, right? That's the thing. But at the same time, yeah, you're running the risk of like telling the wrong story to a very rabid fan base, because that's the thing is, if they don't like what you're going to put out, they're going to watch it because they're Star Wars fans. Like, I guarantee you, Lou, you tell me if I'm wrong, if a new Star Wars movie came out in theaters, regardless of the plot line, you're going to go see it.
Yes, I would. I saw the Han Solo movie, and I wasn't a huge Han Solo fan, but I went and saw it.
Exactly. So you're going to go see it, right? So that's, if you put out a show that explains some mystery that no one knew anything about beforehand, they're going to watch it, and there's a good chance they're going to be disappointed. Now, there's a good chance they're going to love it, too, because they're just diehard fans, but you're always going to run the risk of disappointing fans by revealing too much of a story that was previously unexplained.
Very true. And that's what the issue with the sequel trilogy was.
Yes.
People didn't know what happened to Han, Luke, and Leia. One thing I will give Disney credit for, and I could feel the tension in the room. One thing Disney did do very well that was it needed to be addressed. Like I said earlier in the episode, the books.
Yep.
Back in the day, George Lucas would just get a synopsis and he would approve it. That was it. So you had guys making up their own storylines, making up their own lore, contradicting themselves. Disney, when they got the rights, said, nope, we're done. Any book that came before us acquiring it is not canon anymore. It's Legends. Moving forward, all books will have our logo on it. And what I really like is when you open up a new Star Wars book, it gives you the timeline.
Yeah.
And it shows you the movies and it's good. You don't need to know where every single book falls in. So they have like the map of all 9 movies. I believe they have some of the TV shows also to give you an idea of where this book you're reading, this is where it falls in. So like the latest book I read is called Star Wars Brotherhood. It's in between episode 2 and 3.
Okay.
But I know that. But for some, because it has Anakin and Obi-Wan in it, and it's during the Clone Wars, it's okay. It's either between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, but for some they may not know. But it shows it's like, boom, they drop the pin and like, it's in between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Great. If I'm reading Aftermath, which takes place after episode 6, is it like right after episode 6? Is it like almost episode? Nope. It's like right after episode 6. They like have the pin right there. Okay, that's great. That I think is fantastic what they've done to expand Star Wars.
Yeah.
In the right direction.
But they're also, that's the thing, is they're marking it so there's no confusion. This is how the story's going to go.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I think that's good. By the way, I
like
totally
that.
just realized I never asked you. I never got the grade for Return of the Jedi for you. Or what would you give Return of the Jedi?
I would give that a B-.
Okay. So you would rank them based on grades. Empire's at the top. You got New Hope right there in the middle, and then you got Return of the Jedi as the weakest of the three. Not by much, it sounds like, but the weakest of the three.
I think they're all good. Now we get to the prequels. That's going to be a different story.
Yes. Well, we'll grade those two.
If we ever do the sequels,
we might. Who knows?
They need extra credit. They need extra credit.
They would need a lot of extra credit to get a passing grade.
They would. Yes.
Well, fair enough. All right, man. Well, I think we pretty much covered everything we can cover as far as the original trilogy without getting too much into making this a Star Wars podcast. I mean, it is a Star Wars episode of a podcast.
Yeah, but not a podcast.
Right.
Now, I will say the prequel trilogy is my jam.
Okay. And honestly, same here, because I saw, I didn't see any of them in theaters, but I saw them as they came out on like DVD. So I think, I love the original trilogy, but I agree. I think that the prequel trilogy is like almost our generation of new Star Wars movies, right? It was, what made a lot more people Star Wars fans.
I think so. And also there's so much more lore in that. There's more Jedi, there's more Sith. I feel like 1, 2, and 3. Yes, it sets it up storyline wise, but I can't think of the right word. You only have 4, 5, and 6 based on George Lucas's vision of these events happening. Of
right.
Anakin turning to the dark side, the Jedi Purge, Obi-Wan and Yoda being the last of the Jedi until like every year there's like another one and another one and another one and another one that survived. And it was the first Star Wars like spin-off show with the Clone Wars animated show.
Yep.
Not a cartoon, the animated. And that introduced my favorite character. So when I said, we can end on this. So when I said her lightsaber, I was not talking about Rey. I was not talking about Leia. I was talking about Ahsoka Tano, who is my favorite Star Wars character. And we'll touch on her a little bit in the prequel episode.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have a chance to touch on her because she is a prominent character in the Clone Wars animated series, which was still from our childhood. So
yes.
I think I think we absolutely can. So awesome, man. Well, listen, before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to talk about what's going on with the channel because we've got some really cool content going out there consistently. All about Power Rangers because the new Power Rangers special came out on Netflix. You actually put out a review of the special. I won't spoil it as far as what your thoughts were, but if you find the episode on YouTube, you'll probably know pretty quickly what Lou thinks of it. I'll just say that.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, the 30th anniversary of Power Rangers is on Netflix now. So we did a wish list of what we wanted to see in it. We did a review of it as well, and then we're going to be uploading some questions from it, also some fan theories, some good stuff on that as well. But you also uploaded. I'm not an anime fan, so you could probably speak about what you had just uploaded also.
I did, yeah. So, last week, if you listen to the podcast, last week we did an episode on Toonami, and last week was the first, not the first, but I'd say one of the rare instances where I was able to get a video podcast. So it's a podcast episode, but we've got all 3 participants on there, and it was a lot of fun to do. We just talked all about Toonami, which really wasn't my jam as a kid, so I was kind of taking a back seat and just listening to my buddies Derek and Ty talk all about what they think of anime and what got them into it. And so kind of like we're doing with Star Wars here, where I'm never a diehard. There's very few things I'm a diehard fan of. I think Ninja Turtles is one of them, obviously.
Ninja Turtles. Yep.
But other than that, I mean, I'm pretty much along for the ride for a lot of these kind of like fan groups, which is cool because I'm learning a lot about this stuff that I never would have thought to learn about, previous to that. So, which I think is for me a big reason why I love doing this podcast because I get to hear from other people that had those experiences that maybe didn't, but I know there's other people listening that had those experiences as well. So it's a really cool, I love the fact that we have the opportunity to talk about stuff like that. So as far as future videos on YouTube, obviously still doing Power Ranger stuff, but we do have a few more things brewing. I am actually looking to start recording some gaming videos where I've got a new series I'm planning for YouTube called No Continues. I didn't tell you this, Lou. That's the title of it, No Continues.
Okay.
Where I'm going to be playing through old video games, and once I die, game over. That's it. No Continues. I'm done.
Play Super Star Wars. It'll be 5 minutes.
I tell you what, that might be one of them. We'll see. And so, yeah, we'll, I'll do some of those gameplay videos. And then, we got some cool stuff planned for YouTube especially. So, well, listen, guys, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you coming out and coming out. Yeah, like you to travel for this. I really appreciate you logging into YouTube.
Thank you for staying in my guest room. That's been very nice. Make sure you take your shoes off.
Yes, absolutely. And so, make sure you are subscribed on iTunes, YouTube, all that fun stuff. If you know people who are going to like this show, tell a friend, right? If you have a friend, or if if you're listening to this, you probably grew up in the same time period. So I'm sure you have friends that the same thing. They grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. Tell them about the show, whether it's on YouTube or iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you, tell somebody about them. Check out our merch store, by the way. If you're on YouTube, you'll see the links right below here. You can see some of the items we've got up there, and they're pretty cool items. I'm maybe a little biased, but I think they're pretty cool shirts. You can check those out. And if not, the link to the store is in the podcast description on the podcast summary. So wherever you're listening, you'll see that link there as well. So, all right, man. I think that's enough. I think I have enough. That's enough plugs for now. But I appreciate you coming on, Lou. We're going to be back next week talking all about the Star Wars prequel trilogies right before May the 4th. And so, Lou, may the Force be with you.
Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you also.
And we'll talk to you soon.